record. Hi, everyone. I am Hope Archbeck. I am the development manager here at AISES. And again, thank you for taking time to log on and listen to our friends at Microsoft. We are so thrilled to be here with Microsoft to provide you with some information about their Indigenous at Microsoft and just to share their stories of being who they are, their full selves, and working at Microsoft. One thing I did want to announce very quickly is a save the date for our national conference. It is October 6th through 8th in Palm Springs, California. So I hope a lot of students are on here and you can hopefully come to, well, obviously professionals as well, but our students coming to our national conference. Some of the events include the largest college and career fair in Indian country. So we are excited about that. It's almost sold out. So I'm getting excited at least. We have a STEM activity day and a hackathon. There's a student social, which is has a DJ. It's always fun. And then student research presentations. And there are travel scholarships available for students. And I will put Taylor, so it's Taylor Kingsbury's email address in the chat if you want the application open today, June 15th. And I will put her information in if you would like to apply. Oh, it is for STEM majors, and you have to be a full-time student for STEM majors. So those are the requirements. But now I'm going to hand it off to our friends and to Adonis at Microsoft. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and welcome, everyone. We're very honored to be sharing this space with you all and to have an opportunity to speak to our friends at the AISES community. My name is Adonis, and I'm with Microsoft. I work with our data center community development team. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning to open this up for our panel discussion today called Indigenous at Microsoft. We have a wonderful lineup of ERG community members. I'll talk a little bit about what an ERG is at Microsoft and what that acronym stands for. But as I begin, it is important to start off this call honor and privilege of calling in today from the traditional homelands of my people at Taos Pueblo. And we'll play a quick video. I'm hoping that it'll play to do a land acknowledgement for many of the panelists that are calling in from our headquarters up in the Redmond and Seattle area.
We acknowledge that Microsoft is headquartered on the traditional homelands of the Sammamish, the Duwamish, the Snoqualmie, the Suquamish, the Muckleshoot, the Snohomish, the Tulalip, and other Coast Salish peoples that have made this area their home since time immemorial. And we acknowledge all Indigenous peoples around the world. With a global presence, Microsoft honors these original stewards of each place and the Indigenous people who are with us today, who continue to commemorate and bring light to their histories, culture, and heritage. The mission of the Indigenous at Microsoft Employee Resource Group is to honor, share, and celebrate Indigenous cultures within Microsoft and across Mother Earth, while shaping inclusive technology to empower future generations. Whether you identify as Indigenous or you're on a journey of allyship, you are welcome to join our community. Find out more at aka.ms/Indigenous.
Great, so we start with the video and acknowledgement, as I mentioned, for our headquarters up in the Pacific Northwest. And it's important that we start these conversations with that acknowledgement for a number of reasons. It's one of the many missions that we have as an employee resource group to integrate Indigenous methodologies and ways of doing things into the Microsoft acronym ERG. What that stands for at Microsoft is an employee resource group. At Microsoft, we received this official designation as a group, a worldwide community back in 2019, and so we're still relatively new. But during this time, we've seen phenomenal growth across the globe. We truly are a collective voice of employees who identify as Indigenous or identify as being on a journey of allyship for Indigenous communities to north of about 1,500 community members across the globe to help shape and drive practices and the general direction of our company. So today, we'll have representatives from our community. On the next slide, we'll talk about all the different representation that we have at the company. I mentioned we're a global voice. We have 5 great representatives from the who identify as Indigenous or an ally to the community to share a little bit more about their journey, how they got to Microsoft, and what it's been like as an employee to experience the community that we've established. And so it's my honor to introduce and hand things off to our moderator, Thomas, to kick off the panel discussion. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Marquis. I am located here in the Seattle area, at the headquarters of Microsoft. And I am a senior corporate counsel here at Microsoft. And I am a member of the Citizen Potawatomi tribe. You might be wondering, why is a lawyer talking to a group of you folks who are interested in science and engineering? And part of the reason is to sort of highlight that there are many different paths here to Microsoft. I was actually an engineer for over 10 years before I went into the law. And I still work with technology quite a bit today as I help our product groups develop their technologies and our products and figure out which of those products, or excuse me, which one of those technologies would make good candidates for patenting, or in order to help those client groups understand how they can manage intellectual property in general to benefit the products that they develop. So with that, I would like to ask the rest of our panelists to give just a brief sort of lightning round introduction to themselves with essentially their name, their location, and what their role is here and their affiliation, if any. So David, could you start us?
Sure, yeah. So I'm David Salagento. I am a senior content program manager at Microsoft. I work on the main campus. I'm actually in my office right now in Redmond. And I am a member of the Haida tribe from Southeast Alaska.
Willow?
Thanks, David. Thanks, Thomas. Hi, everyone. My name is Willow Young. I'm Lac Flambeau, Ojibwe, and Lakota. I've worked at Microsoft for 13 years now. I'm currently sitting in our Bravern office in Bellevue, Washington, in Western Washington State. And I also have had a varied career with different roles in Microsoft Advertising, or MSA. And my current role is Senior Learning and Development Manager. And I'll be happy to share a little bit more about my career path at Microsoft. Over to you, Lance.
Thanks. I'm Lance Wilson. I've been at Microsoft for 7 years, and I'm an ally to the Indigenous community here at Microsoft. And I'm based in my remote office in Mesa, Arizona, and I am a seller. So I do Microsoft advertising sales. So I actually work in the kind of the same org as Willow, but do sales for ads, talk to many brands and advertisers who are selling ads on MSN.com and Outlook.com. I think.
And Zachary?
Yes, my name is Zach Oxendine. I am based out of the Reston office in Virginia, although I am on this webinar today from Las Vegas, Nevada, because I am at a conference for Splunk. I am a service engineer on many different products that are cybersecurity and data related for Microsoft, and I've been here for a year. So.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides at this point so that we might have sort of a little bit more personal conversation. To kind of dive a little bit deeper into our panelists' background and the kinds of paths that they've taken to end up here at Microsoft, I'd love to kind of start again with each of you and ask a little bit more about what your journey was into Microsoft here, and ask if everything kind of went according to your original plan or if you had some changes along the way. So David, could you start us again?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, definitely. Things did not go according to plan. I'm actually, when I graduated from college, I was actually a huge Apple fanatic. I bought one of the very first Macintoshes. I only used Apple software. I actually thought Microsoft Windows was kind of a cheap knockoff of the Mac OS, and so I actually did a lot to sort of avoid Microsoft, which is hard when you live in the Northwest. I was actually at and this is 22 years ago, so I'm this is before the internet, so it was early days, and I was at a small startup in Bellevue that seemed to be doing well, and like a lot of startups, things sometimes take a quick turn for the worse, and I found myself married with a baby on the way, and a house that I just bought, and I sort of got a little desperate and freaked out. So I had to find a job real quick, and I decided that I would do this crazy search and just go all out. I ended up applying to, I think, 300 different high tech companies in the Seattle area, and I sort of did the opposite of a lot of people suggest. A lot of people suggest doing some networking. I decided to do the sort of junk mail approach because I didn't like the idea of networking, and I sent out 300 letters, and I had a big party at my house where friends came over and they stuffed envelopes. And I decided to try to make it more effective by putting a little, asking each of my friends to put a little sticky note on my resume with a little note to the CEO of the company. So I had a friend who had my resume that I was going to send to Microsoft, and he said, "Bill, David's amazing. You have to check him out." And they put the note on and they sent the letter. And I figured it would go to Bill's office, but that Bill wouldn't actually see it. His assistant might see it and think, "Oh my goodness, somebody who knows Bill sent him this resume. I'll send it to HR." Hopefully the yellow sticky note would stick on. Someone in HR would see it and think, "Oh my God, this comes from Bill's office. Let's pay attention to this." It actually worked out really, really well. Out of those 300 resumes, I had 11 job interviews and 11 job offers. And one of them was at Microsoft. And so that's how I got here. And the only reason I took the position at Microsoft is it was in Microsoft research. And I was working on, they needed somebody to help them with their speech recognition software developers kit. And I figured Microsoft research was cool. It wasn't exactly like selling my soul to promote Windows. And so that's what I did. And I started 22 years ago, and I've been here ever since.
Thank you so much, David. That's such an amazing story. Willow, how about your path here to Microsoft?
Yes. Also, it did not go according to plan. In my experience, life is a long and winding path, and we can make plans, but we'll just see how life turns up and where it will lead us. So I actually did not major in STEM when I was in college at Stanford, and I was a member of the Stanford American Indian Organization, or SAIO. I was following my passions at that point, and I majored in comparative studies and race and ethnicity with a focus on Native American studies, and minored in creative writing. And I hung out with the AISES kids, but I was not in AISES. I thought, oh, I'm a fuzzy, not a techie. That's what we called it back then. And I worked in advertising to pay the bills and to pay tuition while going to school. And after school, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I fell into advertising because that's what I had been doing to make money all of my life thus far. And it wasn't until a friend actually told me about Microsoft and I learned that, there were Native employees at Microsoft and a support group there, and that Microsoft had an advertising department with amazing, smart people, tons of great resources, cutting edge technology. And I thought to myself, I thought I wouldn't have a career in tech, but maybe I can have a career in tech after all. And I joined Microsoft Advertising 13 years ago, and the rest is history. And I love it. And if you talked to me when I was in college and said, Willow, do you think you'll ever work for a tech company or Microsoft? I would have said, no, are you crazy? But I just didn't know, right? And I think Thomas is going to touch on this as well, that Microsoft is this huge ecosystem with roles in every possible field that you can imagine. So any field could find a home at Microsoft. And I've been really, really happy here. So that's my short story about my journey and how I surprisingly ended up here.
Thank you, Willow. Yes, you're right that there are quite a variety of technologies that Microsoft works on. You wouldn't think that they'd be doing things like heat transfer or even some aerodynamics and fluid dynamics, but there are all kinds of things that happen in our data centers, for example, that have to be engineered out in order to accomplish, the presentation or the provision of all these services that we provide. All right, so Lance, could you give us a little introduction to your path into Microsoft?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, in college, I started out as a film major. I thought I love film, still do, but I thought, oh, this would be kind of fun to do. But that didn't last long, as I didn't really see it really working out from, from the opportunities that I had. So I thought, well, let's just do business because, business is pretty general and kind of a little bit like Willow, not really sure what life is going to look like after college and what I really wanted to do. So I kind of just fell into online advertising. And as I was in online advertising for multiple years, working for, a lot of major companies like Cabela's and some other ones, Skull Candy, I had a lot of interactions with account reps, sellers. And so at conferences, I networked and I worked with some people at Microsoft where I was actually able to get an interview for a certain role that I was not qualified for. But I interviewed for this role that I was not qualified for. And one of the people who were interviewing me, she ended up being my manager for a different role, but she said, hey, I don't think this role fits for you, but you would be really good for this other role that we have opening up. And I got that job, and that kind of led me into selling at Microsoft. And what I've learned as I've been at Microsoft is I love to sell, and I enjoy it. And anyways, that's how I got in at Microsoft, was just really through networking and just kind of this path of trying to figuring out what I was good at and what I enjoyed doing. Yeah, that's a little bit how my path went.
Thank you, Lance. And Zach, you have kind of a unique story. You're one of the newer members of the Microsoft family here, and I'd love to hear how you got to us.
Yep. So I joined the Air Force right after high school, 18 years old. My job was cyber systems operations. The reason I got that job is I took the ASVAB. I got like this long list of like, hey, you can do any of these jobs. And the recruiter was like, circle 10 of the jobs that you're interested in. And the fourth job on that list was cyber system operations, which just translates to like server administrator, system administrator in the corporate world. And so in the Air Force, in my 4.5 years active duty, I came across a lot of Microsoft consultants, people who do consulting for the government on behalf of Microsoft. And I was like, man, like their jobs are so sick. Like, it seems like they're living their best lives. They're all like a great time. And I became friends with a few of them. And so I'm getting ready to do a commissioning program at the University of South Carolina. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out the Air Force and I'm gonna go to the University of South Carolina and I'm gonna commission. Well, I'm 3 months into my semester at University of South Carolina and I'm getting like fillers of job offers left and right. And then one of my buddies at Microsoft was like, you should apply. And so for this internship program while you're a student. And I was like, I'll apply. Phone interview, didn't get it. I was like, dang. And so a couple months passed and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this job offer at this other tech company to do system and network administration. And then at that job, I was able to get another interview, a final interview at Microsoft. And I knew I had that one in the bag. 3 weeks later, my friend hits me up. He said, man, you did really well, but we went in another direction. So that was my second denial at Microsoft. And I was like, dang, but I kept shooting my shot. And so about a year and a half of being at that company, I saw a guy on LinkedIn, shout out Tony. He posted and said, hey, my team's hiring. And the job description was, married very well with my background and what I've done in the Air Force so far and at that defense contracting company. And so I was like, hey, man, how can I get on your team? Like, networking. And he told me, what to look for in the interviews and everything. And I applied for that role. And now here I am a year later, working at Microsoft. So I just kind of kept shooting my shot, and I'm just glad to be here. I love engineering. I love doing engineering for Microsoft, and a lot of the different technologies we're working on are just, they're exhilarating. It's the rapid development and everything of it. It's a great time. So, yep.
That's amazing, Zach. Thank you so much for your persistence, and we're so glad that you're here with us. And I know that we don't have sort of a formal listing of Adonis on our panel, but I think he has such an interesting story as to how he ended up at Microsoft. And I wonder, Adonis, if you'd be willing to share your path here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. And apologies if my internet connection is not as stable as it could be. So apologies if I cut out. I actually, when I graduated undergrad, I had a background in business. It was marketing and management. And I thought the best way to serve my community here in northern New Mexico at Taos Pueblo was to come and support the local artisans and vendors who rely heavily on the tourist traffic that we get in our community. It is, of course, very seasonal. So in the summer and winter months, we saw a lot of traffic and a lot of opportunities to do well. But in the fall and springtime, a lot of these vendors and local sellers were hurting. And so I decided to come and support the community by helping a lot of these small shops go and sell online. So I got kind of introduced to the tech world there. I did that for 2 years and then realized that I could learn a lot more in the entrepreneurship space. And I was learning a lot during this time, a lot of great lessons learned along the way. But I decided, why don't I just go get a degree in entrepreneurship since I'm already so focused in this space. So I decided to go back to school and I went for a master's of business administration. And while I was in my the course for that program, one of the requirements was that we served on a consulting project. And it so happened that Microsoft was one of the project sponsors. And so I actually met Microsoft for the first time. They came to my team and asked if we could develop a framework to measure impact for some of the donations. Did that kind of work. And they said, yeah, we're actually creating this new team called the Data Center Community Development Team. And I got to talking with that project sponsor. He told me a lot about what the group was about. And then he asked me, he said, well, why are you in school? What is it? What's your goal? And I told him that I was mostly interested in bringing impact back to the Southwest US, and more specifically to Native communities here. And he said, what if I told you that this team could help accelerate your work, that you could get meetings with people just because you have the Microsoft logo on your business card? He said, you could get meetings with municipal leaders, large businesses in the community. And he says, I think it'd be a really great and efficient way to create impact in the Southwest. And at the time, I wasn't really looking to long-lasting and meaningful impact. That was really aligned with what I wanted to do. And so I took the offer to apply for the team, and about 3 years later, here I am as well. And I really love my work. I felt that I've had some great success in creating impact here in the Southwest. And I've been fortunate to be asked to serve as a community lead in other areas across the Western US. And so I've seen a lot of growth in this area. And I can't speak highly enough about the ERG community. I won't go too in depth because I want to make sure we have time for our other panelists, but being able to be part of the launching and the growth of this community at Microsoft has been really one of the highlights of my life. And I've just been so honored and proud to be part of that. But thanks for turning over to me, Thomas. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Adonis. I understand that you are a busy person and may have to join another meeting, so I was glad I could catch a little bit of your time. And I think it really illustrates how there are kind of a lot of paths to Microsoft, and that oftentimes it might start somewhere outside of Microsoft or sort of around Microsoft, and then eventually lead into Microsoft. But now that everyone is here in Microsoft, and you have all discovered, and you guys, most of you have been instrumental in creating the internal employee resource group. I wondered if each of you might be able to tell us a little bit about what this ERG community means to you, either as an Indigenous person or as an ally to the organization. David, do you have some thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Definitely have some thoughts. It actually means a lot to me. As I mentioned, I'm from Alaska, Southeast Alaska, born in Ketchikan, raised in Kodiak. And Ketchikan and Kodiak are about 5,000 or 6,000 people. So really small towns, if you're in the lower 48, I'm sure that seems really small, but for Alaska, those are big cities. And so when I got to Washington State, when my family moved here when I was in high school, it was a huge culture shock. It was very, very strange. I didn't fit in. And I sort of had to go through this big process of just learning how everything worked again. Graduated from college, got married, ended up at Microsoft. And one of the things that really stands out, especially with all the really smart people that I work with, is that a lot of people come from these, amazing schools, Stanford or Harvard or, big Ivy League schools and big cities. And it actually means a lot to be able to connect with people who have a similar background, who, even though every tribe is very, very different and we all have very different histories and traditions, it is amazing to be able to talk to people and just sort of compare and to have something in common and to sort of be able to talk about your heritage and your history and where you come from. So for me, this has been a huge opportunity.
Thanks, David. Willow, would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your experience with the ERG? You've been instrumental in it even long before the ERG existed.
Yeah, so one of the first questions I explored when I was looking at joining Microsoft and joining Microsoft advertising was, where are the Native people at? And is there representation at Microsoft? And I was thrilled to find that the answer is yes. And at that time, it was an employee network called NAMER, the Native American Employee NAMER. It's a complicated acronym, but anywho, it was a Native American Employee Network. Employees had created it for themselves to support each other, to stay connected to community. And I was a member of that group for many years, and we talked about, wanting to become an official ERG, an official employee resource group that is, funded by Microsoft, as an official Microsoft entity, has senior leadership executive sponsors, and is able to do even bigger work with broader impact, having that support. And it was a long journey. And I'm thrilled to say that we achieved it. And we are now the Indigenous at Microsoft Employee Resource Group. And we have a global footprint. We have chapters in Canada and Australia and New Zealand and the United States and Latin America, and growing. And I'm currently finishing my term as co-chair of the Indigenous at Microsoft ERG. And we have a wonderful leadership team who's been growing and supporting this employee resource group. And it means so much to me. I don't think there's words actually to encapsulate how much it means, because it's hard feeling alone, feeling like, oh, I'm the only Native person in a meeting. I'm the only Native person in my group. I'm the only Native person in my organization, and constantly having to do the representation and to educate people and to do that hard work and heart work that we all do, right, on behalf of Indigenous people everywhere, and having a community of people that have your back, that support you, that you can learn from, develop each other's careers together, be successful together, and do really amazing things in the field of technology, not, for our communities, for our tribes, and for the world. It's an incredibly powerful thing. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, Willow. Thank you so much for your continued commitment to the organization and to all the work that you have accomplished and that the things you've influenced here at Microsoft and throughout the Indigenous community. Lance, we would love to hear your input on your thoughts on the ERG community. As someone who is one of our most important constituents, and that's allies amongst the Microsoft community and outside of Microsoft. Can you give us some thoughts on your experiences with the ERG and what it really means to you to participate in this ERG?
Yeah, for sure. So I joined the ERG just a couple of months ago, so relatively new. And like Thomas mentioned, as an ally, and really for me, it's just been eye-opening as far as a learning experience from, like Willem mentioned, this is a global group at Microsoft, and there are a lot of different members all over the world, that I hadn't even been thinking of, specifically like South American Indigenous people at Microsoft. And there's just been a lot of opportunities for me to learn about the community, and just not just the community of Microsoft, but Indigenous communities around the world, and some of the initiatives that might be going on in those local communities, and then also obstacles that they could be facing, in ways that we can help as allies and as members at Microsoft. And so for me, it's really about the learning that I've experienced. I did not think that I would learn as much as I have in such a short amount of time. And the other piece too is people have been very welcoming to help to help me find ways to get involved. I know Adonis, he's left the call, but he's been very helpful to me as I've kind of pinged him on the side to ask him some questions about the community and ways that I can get involved. And he's been very helpful and opening to me. He even sent me some things that were happening locally out here for me in Phoenix to get involved. So it's just been really, really nice to learn, and then from what I learned, being able to share that and share more of that with the people that I work with at Microsoft that are not part of the ERG. So that's how it's been impactful for me, for sure.
Wow, thank you, Lance. Thank you for being willing to share your experience and to continue to work with us and kind of grow our family. Zach, I'd be curious to know, since you're newer to us, how you've found the ERG and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, when you have ambitious goals and you want to do really, really hard work, when it comes to representation and equity, from the Indigenous perspective, being a Lumbee person, you need allies, and you need teammates, and you need leaders, partners, what you name it. And so being at Microsoft, okay, now I'm at Microsoft, I'm an engineer here. Like, I feel like I'm in a position where I quote unquote, I made it, like I'm doing well. But how do we create more opportunities for others to be able to do the same thing? And how do we use the vessel that is a company like Microsoft to create more diversity and inclusion and equity in the world with all of their resources and the people that are involved? And so my experience in the ERG, the one year I've been here, I've been, zeroed in on that goal of finding like-minded folks who are willing to do the hard work, willing to put themselves out there to create opportunities, just like for the viewers that we have here on this webinar, and to create opportunities for the Indigenous community that we have at Microsoft, and the things that we're pursuing as employees of a group like this. And so I have been blown away basically by the support of the allies in the Indigenous community on the initiatives I've worked on, building a STEM camp in Washington, D.C. that'll take place later this summer. And I've been blown away just by the, I'm not going to say elders, but by folks that have a lot more experience than me, in the, on this earth, that are Indigenous allies or other, being a part of this group. And because I'm learning from you guys, and I really, really do appreciate that. And I think as a group, the Indigenous ERG, we're just scratching the surface of what we're going to be able to accomplish using our employment and influence. So, yeah.
Thank you, Zach. So just to make sure that we have enough time to available, at least in case there are some questions that we can get to either in the chat and or directly from the audience here, I think we'll maybe sort of trim down some of the questions that we had thought we would get to. But I would like to ask at least at least maybe David and Lance about what they value about working at Microsoft and their role and what they see as how that sort of interacts with the ERG that we have here and or the Indigenous communities in their areas.
Oh, yeah, great question. I think that, this is actually, it gets to the heart of the matter. It's, I think, why I've been at Microsoft for 22 years. And I think it's really because you can have just an amazing impact at this company. Software and technology and computers, have been central to people's lives, since, I've been around. And so I currently work in the Office product group on, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And my role is to help create the templates that you use when you use those products. And Office is used by, almost 1 billion people around the world. And it's used for, for really important things like, getting a job, you use a resume template, or to, save for your children's college education, you use Excel for a budget, or to, present your research results when you're defending your thesis, you might use a PowerPoint template for that. These are things that are super, super important. And the work that me and my team do, can have a role in some of the biggest moments of people's lives. And I love that, I can have a really great impact. And I love that Microsoft is sort of a platform to do those kind of things. And so that's really why I've been here. And it's also, I think, one of the things I can also do is sort of promote some of the Indigenous issues and causes and concerns. Last year, I had this idea to do a template for Native American History Month. And one of the other ERG members proposed some content for that template. And you can actually go into PowerPoint right now and download the template on Native American History Month, and students can use it. And we look at the data and we can see that every year, it's one of our most downloaded templates in November. And so it's sort of cool to sort of take those passions and find a way to sort of instill it and integrate it into such an important product like Office.
Well, that's terrific, David. Thank you. Lance, how about you? Is your work, it's a little bit different than the maybe more traditional scientific work, but I'm curious to know, what it is that you value about the work that you're doing at Microsoft and how that may interact with either the employee resource group and or the sort of growing awareness you have of Indigenous communities.
Yeah, so what I'll say about, what I really value about my work, and it's really not necessarily like the work I do, my day-to-day job, but really just Microsoft as a whole as far as what I value. So before I came to Microsoft, I had no idea how much Microsoft cared for their employees and, the culture and environment that Microsoft creates. I had no idea. And I've been blown away as far as the commitment that Microsoft has shown for diversity and inclusion, but also just in general, work-life balance for employees, making sure the employees are getting all the training that they want and need, and that their voices are heard, that the feedback is being received from employees as far as, hey, whether or not a certain, thing is working, we can provide that feedback to managers, to upper leadership teams, and things change. For me, I just value that so much at Microsoft because I know that it's one of the few companies that actually listens to its employees and actually implements changes to show the employees' value. And as I've talked to other friends, et cetera, that worked at different companies, it's really unheard of. And so if there's a plug to apply at Microsoft, it really is, there are not many companies that will care about you, the employee, that will take care of you, that will, you have something wrong with your family or anything that happens, they're understanding. and they work with you, and they care about your development as well. If you want to move from job to job within Microsoft, your managers highly encourage that. So there's room for growth, and they really do care about the employees. And work-life balance is amazing. And like I said, if I'm doing a plug for Microsoft, I can't speak highly enough about it. There, you will not find a place that's better at taking care of their employees. Maybe just as good, but better, no, because it really is excellent. So that's my plug. If you're ever interested in working at Microsoft, there, you will not be disappointed with your choice.
Oh, that's terrific, Lance. I wanted to make sure that we could try to get to at least some of the questions that we've received. Some of the questions look like they are maybe a little bit more specific to individuals and or particular areas. But there's a couple questions that I wondered if I could just get your guys' input on, and then we could return to some other questions internally. But one of these kind of stood out to me. It asks whether any of you folks have input on ways that you might stand out to recruiters, or have some sort of thoughts on what it is that you think makes, I don't know, the Microsoft community kind of look for different aspects of people. And I know that's a pretty general question, but I'm just curious to know, through your experiences, either in the hiring process or through your own experience of being hired, if you have some thoughts on that, on something that you think is either characteristics that are, personal characteristics that you have seen people at Microsoft be interested in, and or technical experiences, etc. And since Zachary's the most recent new member to Microsoft, I wonder if, Zach, you have some thoughts on how that either worked for you or things that you've seen.
Yeah. I want to get to what Colin was talking about the ERG. It assists with the recruiting. There is portions of the Indigenous Art ERG that interact with HR to find ways to create more inclusive recruiting practices so we can get representation from our Native communities. We actually have a position in the ERG as the external positions that focus on that. We can do a better job. That's a point of interest of mine, and many folks like myself in the ERG are focusing on getting more recruiting. But the ERG as an entity is an internal community. It's just people within the ERG have interests outside of the company, like what we're doing now, to create more opportunities for others. When it comes to getting on with a company like Microsoft, this is my opinion. I think the networking is the best way you're going to go. And so use social media, use websites like LinkedIn, use the universities that you go to, the relationships that you have established, and just shoot your shot. Ask the hard questions, like you're asking now, like, hey, how can I get recruited? Like how rigorous are the interviews? What are the positions that are available? You're going to go much further if you get on LinkedIn right now and find Microsoft recruiters and DM 100 of them than you will applying to 100 positions blindly in this market. That's just the facts. And so I would say, number one, network as much as you possibly can. And then number two, zero in on the skill that you're passionate about. And that's going to take you much further than trying to be the guy that wears 100 or gal that wears 100 hats. Like, I want to be a Linux administrator. I want to be able to code in Python. I want to be able to do Splunk dashboards. Like, no, do just the Splunk dashboards. Do just the Python, because at a company like Microsoft, your expertise is what's going to land you roles on the technical side of things. It's not going to be your ability to do a bunch of different things. That's going to get you roles at other companies, but not at a place like Microsoft. So be great at something and network. Everybody can talk to me on LinkedIn, and I'll give you an email of every single recruiter I know. So that's what I can offer.
That's awesome.
That's terrific. Yeah.
And I'll jump in, Thomas, and I would add, persistence. We have all gotten turned down for a job. Shoot, we've gotten turned down for multiple jobs, but that doesn't matter. That's just part of the journey. You might go for a job and not get it, and go for a job and not get it, but don't give up until you get it, because you will get it. And from my experience, proactively doing your homework about the product or the group that you're applying for a job in is key. So I've served as a hiring manager for many interviews and hiring loops and bringing successful candidates into Microsoft. And one thing that makes a candidate stand out is they have proactively done their homework. So let's take Microsoft advertising, for example. A candidate will proactively research, who is Microsoft advertising? What is the publicly available information about Microsoft advertising? What does the Microsoft advertising UI or user interface look like? Candidates will even go in and create test accounts and campaigns in the Microsoft advertising UI to gain that experience, to see what is it like, what is the advertising experience that clients are getting with Microsoft. And that just, you can apply that concept to whatever particular team or product or group you're interested in, but showing that you want to proactively learn on your own and do your homework and come to the table prepared with the research that you've done, always, in my opinion, gives a candidate a leg up.
That's great insight, Willow. Thank you so much. And there are a couple other questions in the question session, but as I mentioned, they seem a little bit specific, so maybe we'll try to get answers to those either directly or a summary at the end. But if folks have other questions, then I encourage you to enter those into the Q&A chat box there. Let's let me go back to some of the work skills and the experiences that you guys have had relative to your Indigenous communities or your interaction with either the ERG or just other communities that Microsoft serves. And I'd just be curious to know how it is that you guys see your sort of individual work, either the work itself or the skills that you have developed as something that really kind of either supports the communities themselves, the Indigenous communities themselves, or, as we were just sort of talking, efforts to bring additional Indigenous representation into Microsoft. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on those. David, do you have any thoughts on how your work is sort of related and or how it sort of impacts, or your skills that you've developed impacts, or maybe in some way even indirectly supports Indigenous communities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I mentioned some of the template work I do, but something else that just occurred to me just now. I've been thinking about it, and one of the things we get to do a lot, especially when you've been at a company for a while, is you get the chance to meet a lot of new hires and interns and people, even in the high school who intern at Microsoft. And it's a chance to sort of mentor people and to talk to them and to sort of talk about, what exactly kind of what we're doing now, what it's like to work at Microsoft. And one of the things that always comes up, and I see this especially with new hires, that there's this sometimes they call it imposter syndrome, or it's like this insecurity that you're not good enough to be here, and which is a little crazy to me, because you look at people like Zach, who are amazing new hires, and you kind of think that, wow, I wish I were that proactive and energetic and passionate when I was his age. And so I always tell, especially some of the Indigenous young people that I get to talk to, really, it's a chance for you to embrace your differences and who you are, and to sort of be your authentic self. Because if you even got an interview at Microsoft, you're doing incredibly well, because we get so many resumes, and there's something about your background or your accomplishments or your history that make you stand out. So one, getting an interview is an amazing accomplishment. And two, we want whatever it is that we saw in you. There's something about your background. There's something about your ideas. I remember one new hire I recently talked to. She came to us with a ton of criticisms about our templates and all the things that just were bad about them. And we hired her on the spot because she had so many great ideas. So don't be afraid. Trust in your insights and embrace who you are. I guess that would be my advice.
That's great advice, David. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Lance, as somebody in the more business-oriented side, could you give us your thoughts on even sort of indirect aspects of influence or impact on external or even internal Indigenous communities based on the work that you're doing or the skills that you've developed?
Yeah, so really it's being a part of this ERG where there's a lot of connections and opportunities that it provides for me to take the skills that I have or that I've learned or that I'm passionate about, and then to share them basically. And so we have Microsoft, once again, harping on my point why I love Microsoft and value Microsoft, they actually give us time, we call them learning days or even learning weeks, to actually take time away from our day-to-day work and to learn, and also to educate and share and mentor. And so taking those days, taking those times to actually get involved with things like AISES, et cetera. And so I've had opportunities to get involved with mentorships and to volunteer there, where I can share the skills that I have or that I've learned to share them and help with interviews, or just to help kind of navigate, what are the opportunities at Microsoft? Because there are so many. Microsoft is huge, so many different roles. And so having the ERG to help me plug into opportunities that I might not be aware of, to share my passion. And that's kind of how I've gone about it in the brief time that I've been a part of the ERG, and plan to kind of move forward with it, is just to utilize the resources that and the connections that the ERG has to plug myself in.
Thanks, Lance. And I don't know if we have the ability still to have people just come off mute and ask any questions. If that's the case, we'd love to have that opportunity at this point. We'll keep going, but if somebody has a question, I'll stop for just a second and see if we can fit it in.
Thomas, unfortunately, I don't think they can unmute with the webinar ability.
Okay, thanks. Then the Q&A section, if you do have a question, by all means, we'd love to hear your questions and see if we can address it. And I apologize up front that some of them are sort of specific, and so we'll try to answer those more directly individually. All right, then could I ask just briefly if each of you might just look back for a second and think about your path and what you might have done differently, or what you might think some of the students out there today might be thinking they should do, or what you think would be some, changes that you would have made if you kind of had the knowledge that you do now back at the time that you were in your maybe early 20s. And David, do you have a thought on that? You don't look really old enough to be able to look that far back, but would love to hear your insights.
Thank you for that. I'll take that. I'm actually very, very old. Probably an elder in Zach's eyes. I think there are lots of preconceptions about what it's like to work in a high-tech field, and I've seen a lot of change over the years. So I was here when Bill Gates was CEO, and then Steve Ballmer was, and I've seen Satya and the incredible transformation that he's made. And Microsoft has really changed. And even before I started, I mentioned I was sort of anti-Microsoft when I got out of college. The thing that surprised me most when I got here was how thoughtful and funny all the employees were. For some reason, I just didn't expect people working at Microsoft to have a sense of humor or to be really sincere and authentic. I sort of had this picture in my mind of people, staying up all night long, focus only on work and not really having an outside life. And of course, there are times, I have on occasion spent the night at work to meet a deadline. There are crunch times, but we have a lot of fun too, and we get to do things like this and talk to people outside of Microsoft. And so I think having an open mind is probably my biggest piece of advice to my younger self, and to not have so many preconceptions.
Thanks, David. I really liked Willow's comment earlier too about persistence. I think that's something that I didn't really recognize when I was younger, that, just because it doesn't happen the first time doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. Willow, do you have any other thoughts on that persistence or other things that you think you might have done differently?
Yeah, and I would pair persistence with flexibility, because similarly to David, I didn't even think about Microsoft as a career path until it coincidentally fell into my lap, because I had a friend who started working at Microsoft and told me all about it and opened my eyes to something I wasn't aware of. So, I'd go back to my younger self and I'd say, be open and have flexibility and think outside the box about opportunities and just learn more about different companies. And also reassuring myself that I can have a successful career that weaves my identity and the importance of Indigenous community into my day-to-day as well. Like, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. And also, I don't have to have a specific role that is designated only for an Indigenous purpose, or some sort of diversity and inclusion specific role, right? We can all do these things as part of our holistic remit wherever we work. And at companies like Microsoft, it's so supported. And thinking about the progression of CEOs that we've had at the company, and Satya Nadella did this amazing thing to introduce a diversity and inclusion core priority for all employees at Microsoft. So all employees at Microsoft have it in their annual commitments for their performance, that they have to be setting and achieving their own personal objectives on their D&I learning journey, or supporting diversity and inclusion across the company. And so I would have been so thrilled to hear that in my 20s, that I can join a company and I can follow a career path that I'm excited about, and also support diversity and inclusion and Indigenous peoples within the company, and also our communities back home.
Thank you so much, Willow. That really does reflect how diversity and inclusion is really a cultural aspect of the company. And I know we're at time, so I will just share this last little bit, that you are all welcome to go to our Microsoft recruiting website. There are opportunities not only for university students, but even some high school students, depending on your location and certain characteristics. So I encourage you to go there. We will also put these contact information into the chat so that you'll have the links to get to these resources. But I want to thank you guys so much for being willing to spend your hour with us, and hope that it's been useful to you. And we really hope that we get the chance to speak further with you folks, and hopefully welcome you to the Microsoft team. With that, I'll bid you good day. Miigwech.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Y'all take it easy.